Super Mario Bros. It exists, you know, the one that saved the gaming industry from its demise and revolutionized the yada yada yada. Who even cares anymore? Well, I'll tell you what, Nintendo sure does. And they want to make sure you don't forget about this.
Hey, you ever heard about this game? It is a freaking classic.
Yeah, I'm literally holding the game and talking about it. Plus, you were sitting right over there while I was talking about it.
Alright, bud. Just making sure you knew. God, I love old stuff.
The amount of references to this title in specific throughout any Mario game released after the year 2000 is borderline absurd. It almost seems like they're afraid we'll forget about it if they don't mention this game enough. Don't get me wrong, throwbacks to previous games aren't a bad thing, but when there's an entire Twitter account dedicated to pointing out the appearances of 8-Bit Mario and 8-Bit Mario only in modern Mario games, I think it's fair to say that he appears a bit too often. Let's talk about it. Other retro Mario titles are rarely referenced in modern games when compared to how much of this first game gets shown, at least in terms of graphics, as it seems that music references from other mainline games, whether they be subtle or obvious, are much more prominently used in modern games in comparison. That doesn't mean the first game isn't run into the ground in terms of music either though, and that's what I want to talk about first. Why is it that almost every single underground level in the entire series has to have baked into the music in some way, shape, or form? It's like it's inescapable. And don't even get me started on how much they love the original SMB1 theme. Side note, if you're wondering what SMB1 is, it is what I will be using to refer to the first Mario game, Super Mario Bros., for the remainder of this discussion. The main theme of SMB1, and probably one of the most recognizable video game music tracks of all time, is the go-to for Nintendo when they want you to remember the olden days. As someone who has played and completed just about every single Mario game that exists, I'd say that the number of references to this theme in specific is in the hundreds. For one, it's flat out annoying and worn out to me personally at this point, but I don't really view that as a valid reason to criticize its presence, considering how many of the games I've played. Instead, like I've already said, I believe that all of the other games in this series that are now considered retro should be receiving just as much, if not more, recognition to compensate for the overabundance of references to the first game. It's important to remember where you came from and stick to your roots, but like, most of the time they're only pointing at one route and ignoring all the others. The same problem is apparent once we move away from the music as well. Most predominantly, 8-Bit Mario and sometimes other 8-Bit characters and sprites appear in the majority of modern games. Everywhere from the mega transformations in Super Paper Mario, to the secret 1-1 in the theater of New Donk City in Odyssey, to the light-up block pixel art recreations of Mario in 3D World. They're obviously all put there for you to go,
Hey, I remember that.
as all throwbacks are, but I ask the same question once again. Why is it SMB1 almost every single time? Just for some perspective, we also have Super Mario Bros. 2, 3, World, Super Mario 64, and Sunshine to possibly make references to just from the mainline series alone. Yes, Sunshine is retro at this point. It's literally about to turn 20 years old. Additionally, if I had it my way, we wouldn't even stop at the mainline games. After all, Mario has starred in numerous sports games, kart racers, and role-playing adventures, among others. Heck, he's even taught typing for a bit back in the 90s. Incorporating references from any of these games would be even better considering that many of these games have very dedicated fanbases that would kill to see their favorite game referenced in any other entry.
This is day one of committing homicide until Nintendo references Bowser's Inside Story in a new game. Wish me luck!
Now, you may be thinking, why would they go through the effort of adding references to all these games that many people have probably never heard of? Well, my plan is not exactly what you would think. Probably. I'm not saying that these references should be added in the same frequency as the mainline games would be. They would be far more rare and extremely subtle compared to the mainline callbacks, only meant to be noticed and discovered by the dedicated fans of that respective series, which is exactly what I cited earlier as the purpose of these lesser known games being referenced at all. If it wasn't done this way, it's likely that players who aren't familiar with the games being called back to would simply be confused by these, possibly even thinking that it meant something in relation to their actual progression in the game.
What? It's already over? I've only been playing for an hour. Huh? Oh, no. That's just a reference to the credits of Paper Mario.
So, like I've hinted at already, these more obscure references could be related to Mario and Luigi, Paper Mario, Mario Kart, any of the Mario sports titles, or Mario Party. You could even go deeper than that and pull from Luigi's Mansion, Wario Land, or even the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series. I'm not saying that stuff like this isn't present in the series already, it's just so few and far between that I question whether it should even be considered a trend or tradition at all. In terms of the mainline games, including references to the later titles, as I said all the way up to Sunshine, and maybe even Galaxy if you want to push it, could be just as much, if not more effective as including 8-bit Mario for the 400th time. At this point, people who were children when SMB1 released are approaching 50 years old, many of them not even playing video games in general anymore. There is more than enough nostalgia to go around for every game that came after that. People who were born the year Super Mario Sunshine came out are now approaching 20 years old. Do you see my point here? This game and just about every single game that came before it can be referenced, and I have no doubt that plenty will recognize and appreciate them. Luckily, the most recent game in the mainline series, Super Mario Odyssey, has taken some steps in the right direction when it comes to diversifying references, but in my opinion it still has a ways to go. This game is by far the most reference-abundant entry in the series to date, with at least a small, subtle reference to almost every game in the mainline series, if you're willing to reach a little bit. Since it is the most recent game, I'm going to treat it as the current state of throwbacks and references in Mario. So let's take a look at every game up until Sunshine that it references, or at least seems to reference, and see if it can be improved somehow. First off, SMB1, as you may have expected, is the most referenced title in the entire game, with an entire mechanic being centered around Mario in his 8-bit form. There are pixelated pipes located in certain areas of each kingdom that allow you to transform into an 8-bit version of Mario. These sections control like a 2D Mario game as opposed to the 3D gameplay you normally encounter in Odyssey, and often contain other SMB1 blocks and versions of enemies. Also, as I've already touched on, you are able to play through the first level of SMB1 inside of a theater located in the Metro Kingdom as well.
They told me this theater was Despicable Me 2. What is this?
I'd like to clarify that I do not think these 2D sections are fundamentally bad to have in the game. The way they morph into the environment is really cool and is a concept I would like to see explored even further in future installments. This could easily be improved upon by simply including more of the 2D games within these pixel pipes. Have some of them lead to SMB2 or SMB3 sections, and maybe even Super Mario World sections. Each of these different types of 2D sections would adopt the abilities that were present in their respective games, similar to Super Mario Maker. SMB2 sections would allow you to stand on top of enemies and pick them up. SMB3 sections would allow you to grab enemies from the side, throw them, and also build up P-speed. Super Mario World sections could allow you to perform spin jumps. New and unique challenges could be created with this variety in movesets that wouldn't be available if SMB1 was the only game used in these sections. I feel that only using this game is extremely limiting in terms of what is possible within a 2D space. One concern that people may have about these different movesets is the issue of accessibility. Some players may be confused by the differences that come with each of these different games, wondering why they can't do the same thing they did in a previous 2D section. I agree that this could be an issue, but only if the mechanic was introduced incorrectly. If each of the games were introduced at separate times, slowly and progressively, then the player could recognize the difference in the aesthetic looks of each game and become familiarized with the moveset available to them when that specific Mario sprite and other graphics are present. Anyways, I probably just spent way too much time talking about that singular type of reference in a singular game, but I feel that the solution I mentioned could be applied to any future game in multiple scenarios. Not even just with the different movesets, but simply with references to the sprites themselves. It's a simple thing to do, and I stand by my position of wanting 8-bit Mario to share the spotlight with everyone that followed him. Moving on to SMB2, references to this game in Odyssey are really something we have to reach for. The only ones I could find were the fact that Mario pulls turnips out of the ground and throws them as he does with many other vegetables in the original, and that he sometimes uses a rocket to transfer to sub-areas, which was also used in SMB2 to travel between sections. I have no idea if these were intentional or not, but I still thought it was worth mentioning. I think SMB2 deserves far more recognition within modern games than it has gotten before, even though it isn't exactly purely a Mario game.
Hey, did you know that Super Mario Bros. 2 in the US was actually just a reskinned version of Japanese exclusive game Doki Doki Panic? Did you know that the f***ing sky is blue?
SMB3 is another game that is very rarely called back to in Odyssey. First, you can hear a variation of the same sound effect used for P-Speed in the original playing whenever you are in possession of a speed flower. Additionally, whenever Mario captures a Jizo statue in Bowser's Kingdom, it bears a striking resemblance to the statue Mario could turn into while using the Tanuki suit in the original game. The final reference to this game that I could find shows up when the player captures Bowser at the end of the game. During this cutscene, for a very brief period of time, you can see the sprite of SMB3's Bowser. Now, there have been games that have come previously with many more callbacks to SMB3, such as Super Mario 3D Land, which was in some ways a spiritual successor to the original, so it's not like SMB3 is the most neglected of the bunch. Far from it. Honestly, this game is probably the least of my worries when it comes to this lack of references. Next up is Super Mario World. The bonus theme of this game is used in a few sub-areas of Odyssey. Additionally, the Moai enemies from the Sand Kingdom can faintly be heard humming the credits theme to Super Mario World, among a few other classic tracks. The biggest reference to this game in Odyssey, though, appears in the Mushroom Kingdom. Yoshi's house, sporting a look somewhat reminiscent of its original Super Mario World appearance, can be found on a remote floating island in the Mushroom Kingdom that can only be accessed by traveling through a secret painting hidden in the Luncheon Kingdom. This is probably one of my favorite references in the entire game, and this type of stuff is what I would love to see more of in future installments. It's a good example of what I'm referring to when I say that the mainline games should have bigger references than any of these more niche titles that I was also recommending be called back to in modern games.
Speaking of niche titles, you forgot to talk about Mario's early years. Mario's what? Just look.
You chose the one, which is wet.
What the hell?
Now we arrive at the biggest of them all, Super Mario 64. This game is by far the most referenced title behind SMB1 because of the inclusion of the Mushroom Kingdom. This kingdom contains a huge exterior recreation of Peach's castle from the original, as well as a recreation or reimagining of the lobby of the interior to go along with it. The kingdom truly feels like a love letter to 64, with Yoshi on the roof of the castle, paintings to jump into to refight bosses on a harder difficulty, draining the moat around the castle, looking up into the ceiling for a star, and much, much more. I would like to preface by saying that I do not think that every game should get this treatment. After all, Super Mario 64 was a really big deal when it originally released, and it is still loved by millions of fans today. Anyways, a few other things worth noting are the fact that you can wear a costume that gives you the lower poly appearance of Mario in 64, and the fact that the Mushroom Kingdom also has a small area that almost exactly mimics the courtyard from the original game as well. There's plenty more I could mention, but all I'll say for now is that discovering this kingdom after the credits was simply a joy.
Wow, what a good game. You can now travel to the Mushroom Kingdom? I think I'm gonna cry. Dude, it's just a video game. Calm down. This is the best day of my life.
Finally, we have Super Mario Sunshine. This is a game that seemingly feels quite neglected in Odyssey when compared to all the others, and there's a reason for that I'll mention in a second. But let's take a look at all the references that are actually in the game first. For starters, there is an outfit inspired by the game in Odyssey, with Mario in a sort of summer outfit that also features shine sprites on the shirt. Additionally, the sound used when refilling the water while capturing these specific enemies from the Seaside Kingdom is identical to the sound used when refilling Flood in Sunshine. Finally, Mario has a chance to use an open palm in his Moon Collection pose, which is reminiscent of the pose he made when collecting a Shine Sprite. Seems like a pretty bare-bones set of references, right? Well, it likely wasn't originally intended to be that way. Many people already know about this, but in case you didn't, it seems likely that at one point, Isle Delfino, the island on which Super Mario Sunshine takes place, was meant to be coming to the game originally or as DLC. Before the game's release, numerous small billboards popped up in Japan promoting Odyssey's release. These advertisements contained a small map of the world of the game, and at the bottom left you could see a very small island that bears a striking resemblance to Isle Delfino, which is shaped like a dolphin. This led many fans to believe that the island was planned to appear in the game. When the game actually released, though, it was nowhere to be found. The only kingdom present that referenced a previous game was the aforementioned Mushroom Kingdom. However, it did not end there. Players eventually noticed that the globe on the Odyssey in the final game contained remnants of Isle Delfino in the exact spot it was depicted on in the billboards. It almost seemed like someone simply used the smear tool in Photoshop to cover it up at the last minute. People still held out hope that this island would come later as DLC or as a free update, but this smear on the globe made it very likely that the addition of Isle Delfino was cut very close to the end of development. This is likely why Sunshine references were so scarce in Odyssey, but I guess at least right now it looks like we'll never know. Now that I'm almost done complaining, I would finally like to acknowledge the fact that many people probably think this is the most insignificant and pointless thing to point out as a problem in the Mario franchise. Well, I would argue that even though it is a seemingly insignificant problem, it is still worth talking about. It was enough of an issue to me that I decided to talk about it for nearly 20 minutes, so it's got to have some grounds for a discussion, right?
You need to go outside.
The thing is, these days whenever I see a reference to SMB1 in a modern game, I don't really think, oh, that's a cool reference. Instead, I'm thinking, oh, there's another SMB1 reference. What makes it worse is that oftentimes they're not even cool or clever references. It's usually just an 8-bit Mario appearing in some form on screen or the 1-1 theme being played or remixed. The concept, at least when executed in this way, feels overdone and worn out. You may say the fact that these types of references are so widely known are what gives them their appeal, but like I said, enough time has passed that people possess nostalgia for plenty of games beyond the first. The solution to this problem is quite obvious, and I've already mentioned it multiple times, but once again, the other games deserve the spotlight just as much as the original. At this point, Mario is so much more than what he did in the first game, and I think that should be made apparent through the references just as much as it is everywhere else. Even further, the Mario franchise is so much more than just Mario, so the incorporation of more references to other characters is something I'd love to start seeing. To be clear though, I'm not saying they should randomly start referencing obscure characters like Tatanga from Super Mario Land, but like older versions of Yoshi, Toad, Daisy, characters like that would be really cool to see. I mean, how interesting can Mario be, especially after showing up that many times?
You know, I see you around these parts a little too often. What kind of funny business are you getting involved in? Huh? Better f***ing answer me, kid!
It's very possible that my entire problem with the way throwbacks are executed stems from the fact that I have played and completed just about every single Mario game there is, like I already mentioned. I have seen the vast majority of what the franchise has to offer, including all the references to previous games. For the casual or average player, SMB1 references are probably a cool and exciting nostalgia trip, but for someone like me, it just feels run into the ground. Heck, even if you are a more hardcore player, I may have just given you something to complain about that you never knew you wanted to complain about before. Either that or you think I'm a nitpicking idiot who is criticizing something with zero overall significance whatsoever.
Oh yeah! Got another classic for you right here. That's just the same game you showed me earlier.
Ah, silly you. Always playing tricks on me.
You know what? I've actually got another classic right over here I can show you. You gotta love this one, right? Never heard of that one.